Well, it's with some discomfort that we're about to cover a topic that, you know what, I usually let this sort of thing pass me by. The sort of stuff that has some political commentators pointing fingers and laughing and making mountains out of molehills. I'm in two minds about this one. But there is something of substance here that's worth talking about. I'm talking about Chris Bowen's welcome to country, his modified global welcome to country at COP28. Yeah, okay, there's a beat up there, but there is also a story. And to help me dissect this is none other than Anthony Dillon. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Obviously, there was a very quick beat up and blow up when people saw this. I'll just play the clip very quickly.
Friends, I begin with an acknowledgement that at the heart of action on climate change must be profound respect for those who've cared for our respective lands for millennia, the indigenous people across the world.
Now, this was said to an enormous international forum in the Middle East where they don't do welcome to countries, by the way. Australia is one of very few parts of the world where that is even a thing. How does this strike you that this is coming from one of our most senior representatives of Australia as a people in a forum like that?
Look, I'm not losing sleep over it, but it seemed a little bit misplaced. However, to his credit, he did tie it in with climate change. So there's kind of a loose link there. And
Sure.
I'd like to explore that issue if we have a chance.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely. I find it interesting here. This is the kind of thing that, let's say Sky News, I don't want to name names, but some networks will jump on and make a mountain out of a molehill. And this is the stuff that I'll normally let pass me by because honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. But what did change my mind on this particular clip is it actually feels deeply disrespectful to the indigenous people that are supposedly being honoured with the welcome to country. To just kind of grab it and repurpose it like that and shove it out there in that international context, for me, makes it more about the person giving the welcome to country, more about Chris Bowen being seen to sort of observe this almost religious observance than it really is about any genuine acknowledgement. How do you think Indigenous Australians more broadly, even the ones that do want a welcome to country, how are they going to respond to this?
Yeah, some will be like you just said, but I suspect there'll be others because he tied it to climate change.
The cause
Some
du
will jump on
jour.
that and say, some will say, "Oh yes, we're the experts on that."
Okay, so actually, this is a valid point. What exactly can we learn from Indigenous peoples in helping us deal with climate change? Can you fill me in on that one?
Yeah, look, in this day and age in 2023, well, first of all, let's go back. Prior to colonisation, yes, the Indigenous people were caretakers of the land, and it was certainly a different story back then. Where in this country you may have had, I don't know, 500,000 to 1,000,000 Indigenous people
Mm.
at any time. So the land was much easier to look after. But these days, when you've got in Australia 27 million people, no Indigenous person has had experience at managing a country with that many people.
Mm.
So I'm not trying to downplay what may have happened prior to colonisation, but I don't think those skills, unless we're ready to give up our air conditioners, and I tell you what, in Sydney today it's a hot day. I won't be giving up my fan. Unless we're prepared to give up all those sorts of things, and I don't think many are. I can't, and I'm happy to be convinced otherwise, but I can't really see what from the past these Indigenous caretakers of the land could do that would be helpful, say, in a country with 27 million people.
No. I think maybe they have the answer to that because as part of the COP28 outcomes, there was a commitment from many countries to triple the amount of nuclear energy, and perhaps Chris Bowen needs to go and ask our Indigenous communities about their expertise in running nuclear facilities. That might actually really help us with our energy mix.
Yeah, and oh look, I heard, I can't remember what it was. I saw something the other day, but apparently some Indigenous people had some understanding of the atom and all that sort of thing.
Oh, I see.
Um,
That's wow.
yes, um, that'll probably be in Dark Emu Part Two,
Was that
maybe.
was that on a rock drawing somewhere? They found it right next to the person with the spear, and then there was the atom with the electrons. That makes
The
perfect
atom, yeah,
sense.
buzzing around, yeah.
Yeah, buzzing around.
Um,
Now, look, I don't do any of this to be disrespectful towards Indigenous Australians. There are very real issues there. I mean, the gap is real in terms of outcomes, in terms of quality of life, in terms of what we're seeing in Indigenous communities, lifespans, health outcomes in so many different ways. It just feels to me like Chris Bowen and this particular stunt if anything, is rubbing salt in that wound. This is not done for Indigenous Australians. This is done for Chris Bowen, so that he can stand on that global stage and say, look at me, I'm acknowledging all of the Indigenous peoples of the world. This is part of the problem, is it not? It's politics that's caused a lot of these bad outcomes.
Yeah, there's better things you can do to help Indigenous people rather than this ceremonial welcome to country. And timing and context is everything. I don't mind seeing a nice, short, sweet welcome to country, either by an Indigenous or a non-Indigenous person, or acknowledgement of country or welcome to country. But when it's done to score political points,
it concerns me that this does have the feeling of becoming a state religion. We tell ourselves that we live in a secular country where there is no government-mandated religion, but this is really beginning to feel to me as if, they're cancelling Australia Day, they're toning down Christmas and so forth. There's a lot of other things that are being toned down. But this particular thing, this one thing is being amped up. Is this tantamount to becoming a state religion?
Look, based on just following on from what you have said, maybe it's reached the peak because there has been more backlash or resistance to it. So I'm hoping it's not going to go any further. We can only hope. But, it certainly had become religious, ceremonial, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it has.
And I don't think people would mind hearing it and seeing it if they could also see that there was some really great work being done to help the most disadvantaged Indigenous people. So we seem to be big on the welcome to country, but not as big on action to coalface.
Yeah, well, this has been a problem for a long time. This was one of the reasons why the no vote got up. If we can just go back a few months to the Voice, the no vote got up largely because Australians, including a significant proportion, arguably a minority, there's argument over the representation within Indigenous communities, but certainly a significant minority, even within Indigenous communities, voted no. And it seems a big part of that was just frustration of the sense of this is just another political thing. When are we going to see some real world action?
Yeah, exactly. There's no substitute for the hard action at the coalface, like I was talking about. I don't outright oppose symbolism, but so long as it's used alongside action, it cannot replace action, which is what we've had for far too long.
Yeah.
Banning Australia Day, that's just another symbolic thing. Not going to help this person.
Well, Anthony, I always enjoy talking to you, but I've got to be honest, this isn't a story that I particularly enjoy. It's just, it's such a symptom of so much of what's wrong with our political class. Symbolism on the global stage is something that they jump at. Real work on the coalface, of course, well, they're nowhere to be seen when that needs to be done. But I do appreciate you chiming in on this and helping me to wrap my head around it. And thank you for joining us here on the Aussie Wire News.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.